This video is sponsored by Hillary Clinton. Don't forget to Pokemon go to the polls.
13 years Dave Henson lived in that house. Never once did he back into me.
Yeah, of course he was a 500-pound shut-in.
They replaced that wall pretty nice, though.
Yeah,
Yep.
that looks all right. I like the way that
matched
turned
paint and
out.
everything.
Hi, I'm Reviewed to Death. You may remember me from such liberal propaganda pieces as Illegal Immigration, The Proxima Generation, Shinless Old Freaks, Very Special Brothel, and Sexual Education, Humpty's Revenge. Well, now I'm here to talk to you about a very different kind of people, a people that have long been unfairly persecuted and demonized for speaking their minds, a people that should be protected at all costs, and who I share a downright unhealthy attraction towards. I am, of course, referring to those pillars of any community, comedians. Now, there's been a lot of talk lately about what people are allowed to say, and thanks to a rebellious "fuck you, mom" spirit laid down by our forefathers, American citizens have the right to say anything or produce anything their hearts desire. Well, okay, as long as it isn't an incitement to violence, defamation, fraud, anything that violates intellectual property rights, true threats of bodily harm, or saying "Baba Booey" in my comments section. Isn't it such a joy to live in such a free country, Bobby? It sure is. But not everyone feels the same warm caress of Lady Liberty's labia. In fact, some swamp creatures that I hesitate to call people choose to misuse their freedom of expression to critique and even argue with others through a technique that political scientists have dubbed the New York Hello, which makes me want to vomit up my California cheeseburger until the sun explodes. Let us take a look at one such godless communist right now, shall we, Bobby? We sure will, Bobby. By his thumbs we will. Our story begins at the Hill House, where the villain of our piece, Henry Rutherford Hill, already has hatred bubbling up from his throat, choking his words.
You have got to drive me to school today. I cannot stop grading.
This seething malice blinds Mr. Hill to his surroundings, causing a near-fatal accident with his neighbor.
Oh, my neck is broken. I'll sue you for everything you have. Oh, it's Hank Hill. What's the point? I have everything you have, but better.
Now then, let's test your knowledge of proper driver etiquette. What should Mr. Hill do next? Should he A. exchange insurance information with Con and take comfort in the fact that no one was seriously hurt? B. offer to repair both vehicles at his expense? Or C. hurl xenophobic remarks? Let's see which option Mr. Hill takes.
Con, on this side of the earth, we back out to the right.
If you said C, congratulations! I'm now living inside your walls. Toasty. As I adjust to inhaling the rat feces in your insulation, let's follow Mr. Hill to his insurance company. And here, I'll even get the ghost of George Washington to open the door for our cameraman. Take it away, Jojo!
Did you have anything to drink this morning, Mr. Hill?
No.
Did you use a mouthwash or cough syrup?
No.
Did you eat an unusual amount of sausage?
And somehow, we are brought to the perplexing realization that Hank has gone his whole life without understanding the finer points of insurance.
Why should my rates go up, Miss Ka'aliki Ali'i?
Well, it's gonna cost us money to fix your truck.
What kind of insurance is that? Why don't I just take out a loan, fix my truck, and avoid the middleman?
You can't drive without proof of insurance.
Feeling a little confused? Well, don't be. Now that we've gotten that cleared up, let's hear what kind of traffic schools are available for Mr. Hill's re-education program.
Smokers traffic school, vegetarian traffic school. It's like no matter what problem you have, they have a traffic school for it.
But because Mr. Hill knows as much about slang and/or ebonics as he does insurance, he mistakes defensive traffic school for defensive traffic school, leading him to enroll in a class run by a certain powerful voice.
Yo, 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 Buddha sack in the house, Buddha sack in the house, Buddha sack in the house.
That's right, viewers, Buddha Sack is indeed in the house, much like how I've created a nest in your attic with Bagul.
Buddha sack, you crazy.
And fun fact, the writer of this episode, the legendary Johnny Hardwick himself, originally had a very different name for Buddha Sack, one that was changed by the sexiest people alive, the Fox Censors. Can you guess Johnny's original name for Mr. Sack? Was it A. Crack-a-Nut, B. Bust-a-Nut, C. Spunk Spitter, or D. Harold Humpty? Please take a moment to key in your answer. If you guess anything other than B, then you are wrong. Dead wrong. But don't feel bad, I'm dead wrong about everything, all the time. Why do you think I look like this? But thankfully, we have the delightful Chris Rock to get us back on the path of righteousness.
Check it out. Look at all the white people we got up here in traffic school tonight. And they say only black people break the laws. Ooh!
Speaking as someone with absolutely no experience in improv or stand-up comedy, I can only give what is called by legal scholars a pig-ignorant opinion about Chris Rock's performance here. And speaking from a position of ignorance, I have to say that I find Budasak's material here surprisingly clever. Instead of throwing out a bunch of personal stories about traffic jam kerfuffles, he comes out and openly mocks his students with very car-centric jokes.
Check out girlfriend. Got a booty so big, if you put numbers on it, she could press license plate.
He relies entirely on working the crowd, which is a very high-risk, high-reward style of comedy. If people aren't open to being mocked for their misshapen man boobs or Owen Wilson haircut, then things can get very ugly very fast. Comedians are a lot like chemists, since both professions start with the letter C, and both have 9 letters, as long as you give chemistry a double E and pronounce it chemistry. God, that sucked! The difference between insulting someone and insulting someone in service of a joke is so heavily steeped in situational context, delivery, environment, and audience expectations that it is impossible for me to give an exact formula for how to do it right. But as my Meemaw used to say, quote, "You don't have to know how to ride a bike to know when someone is fucking your bicycle."
How many dirty, stinking apes does it take to screw in a light bulb? 1 dirty, stinking ape to screw in the light bulb, and 2 dirty, stinking apes to throw feces at each other.
Comedy is truly the crossroads between art, science, social joie de vivre, and poop jokes. And since Hank is going into this class with the expectation of receiving a traditional education, he isn't in on the joke, leading to a tense situation.
Do you have a lesson plan?
What'd you say? What'd you say? You trying to say that a black man can't put together a lesson plan? Well, I got a lesson plan. I ain't planning on teaching. Lesson, you shut up!
But much to Budasak's credit, when Hank starts to back down and get uncomfortable, Mr. Sack diffuses the situation and even tries to hype up Hank to the crowd.
Well, hold on now. I didn't mean to be...
Cracker, are you taking me serious? Gotcha!
And it's this little bit of dialogue that gives away the whole game of comedy. It couldn't be spelled out any clearer. You are not supposed to take anything comedians say personally because it is all for fun. In much the same way that caricaturists will exaggerate your hook hands and swollen goiter, Budasak is going to mock you for the purposes of entertainment. That's what he does. That's his whole job description. And Mr. Sack's legacy is so powerful that even Bobby himself recognizes it, which is great because we haven't seen him do much celebrity worshipping since his attempt to rip off the celery head shtick.
I saw him on TV 3 years ago on Breakfast at the Apollo. He was making fun of white people, like how we talk funny and we don't have any butts.
Hey, whoa. Now that's hitting below the damn belt. How dare this show make the insinuation that white people have bony asses? Right, never mind. Proceed. But yes, this particular line of joke is a bit of a low-hanging fruit, and even though myself and Hank do feed into this notion, the 4 little letters of P-A-W-G do sort of pull this conversation in a different direction.
I suffer from a genetic condition called DGS.
Oh, I'm sorry, Hank. It's just that I don't know what it's like, because obviously I have got it going on back there.
But rather than speculate on that cheeky subject, I do want to acknowledge that explaining a joke takes away much of its power and, even worse, trying to add logic to certain absurd claims is eye-rollingly obtuse.
Well, you can't eat propane, so...
For God's sakes, it's flammable!
I could have gotten that!
You would have never gotten that!
Jokes aren't meant to be taken literally. They are by their very nature an exaggeration or oversimplification of things. So me saying, excuse me, I don't know if I care for these inaccurate jokes would be the most foolish thing I could do, or rather the second most foolish thing I could do, which would be turning down someone who fits into that category of PAWG. I mean, hell, the show itself even makes a big joke out of how seriously Hank is taking the yo mama jokes.
Well, has he ever seen your mother?
No.
Is she overweight?
Not by half.
Well, then that's not funny.
And now, because I'm a hack writer who has less talent than an aardvark at an Alcoholics Anonymous' assembly about alliteration, I'm going to throw a few rapid-fire insights at you. Ready? Here we go. This is the second episode in a row to use the word cracker.
Go Cracker! Go Cracker!
Ah, maybe Cracker neighbor some use after all.
The Hills have a menacing cactus in their dining room, and they themselves seem to be feasting on some hungry man dinners so fancy. The girl behind Hank seems to be a fusion of Donna and Tammy Duvall, which makes her something of my dream woman. But rather than go on yet another one of my rants about how much I love women, look at Dale cruising around with his gas container sticking out of his mower. How wild. Hank wouldn't approve, that's for sure, no more than he approves of Hollywood, because, as we come to see, Hank makes the insightful point that show business is inherently evil and that comedians will often suffer terrible fates.
Sure, they get beautiful women and drive fast trucks, but eventually...
They have fast trucks?
And of course, in an effort to prove to Bobby how pathetic Buddha Sack's life is, he brings Bobby to the class, which goes in a very different direction than Hank was expecting.
You right. Buddha Sack is a sad man. But not as sad as your daddy's sorry self with his 4 eyes, too many pies, super-sized, Cracker Jack fries.
My god damn, Hank looks man enough to slap old Buddha Sack. Sheesh. Good thing he didn't though. That would have made him look like a total fucking idiot. But more broadly, let's notice that Buddha Sack is primarily targeting Hank, not Bobby. And why is this? Well, it's because Bobby is going along with the act and doesn't throw a fit. The more Hank pushes against Buddha, the more incentive Buddha has to roast him. And really though, I think if Hank hadn't been there, I think Mr. Sack would have found an even poorer sport to hit up.
Only one thing worse than white people driving, and that's DWO, driving while oriental.
Ooh, cheap shot!
Ah, it's always funny when it isn't you, huh, Con? But after Bobby sees Buddha Sack's act, he starts recycling some of the comedian's jokes to the amusement of the guys and the mortification of his father.
And white people always be walking around like this. Like they be crushing diamonds in there or something.
White people do walk like that, really, especially in the army.
Look, I appreciate you guys humoring Bobby, but what the boy needs right now is to be demoralized into giving this up.
Now, do I find Bobby's material here funny? Not particularly, but that's because he's not adding his own flavor, he's just trying to be Buddha Sack Jr., which is so true to life about how kids will act when they begin to fixate on something. I think we all went through a point in our lives where we tried to do something that a celebrity or a parent or a sibling did, although in our own crappier way. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. Imitation, even a crappy imitation, is a really good way of getting to understand the basics and getting used to whatever skill that you want to learn. And because Bobby does want to improve his comedic talents, he seeks out Buddha Sack at the comedy club, Snaps, and finds the man in a much darker place before, both literally and figuratively.
TV's not where it's at, Bobby. It's just giving people the same old stereotypes, playing the same old stories. I ain't want to do that. What I want to do is make people laugh and think.
That's why you teach traffic school.
Yeah, that's why I teach traffic school.
Man, that is so raw and real. It is easy to think that comedians are just as funny off stage as they are on stage, but the reality is usually quite different. I think King of the Hill did such a fantastic job with portraying Buddha Sack as this in-your-face and energetic guy in the classroom, but they did an even better job by showing that he does have his calmer and more introspective moments. And what's so interesting about this is that Hank totally called it earlier in the episode. He said that Buddha Sack is at heart a sad man, and that's damn true.
I'm gonna take you to that traffic class tonight so you can see the lonely, pathetic future comedy has to offer.
Yeah, I did some TV a few years back. Did the LA thing. Sit down, have a bottle of ketchup.
This is a guy who was on TV, possibly even a rising star, but then he made one wrong move, he pissed off the wrong person, and boom, he finds himself stuck in a little nothing town in Texas, trying to fit in his comedy skills wherever he can, be that in traffic school or at the small comedy club that also has him taking care of the grunt work. Now, we can only speculate as to what brought him so low, but he does say that he got, quote, risque, which could mean anything from a poorly received joke to a drunken rampage to systematic genocide, but I like to think it was a yo booty so big joke back in the day where having a large butt was more of an insult than a compliment. Whatever the case, what we're seeing with Budasak is someone who is dragging the corpse of his dead dreams behind him. It is so easy to see other people making it big and think, why not me? But then the bills come and the opportunities dry up and you find yourself betraying your heart's own desires just in favor of getting by the damn day. But geez, that's way too serious of a subject for this crummy YouTube video. So quick, let's see Hank conducting a little science experiment, goggles included, of course. Absolutely terrific. Anyway, upon hearing Bobby's jokes about white people, Budasak is taken aback and tells the young lad in a very kind way that those kind of jokes don't work because he's part of the group he's trying to make fun of, trying to sound like he's an outsider looking in when he definitely isn't.
White people think the hood is something on their sweatshirt. And, how come the cops always be pulling me over?
And while yes, there are some fantastic comedians that are able to poke fun at themselves, their people, their traditions, their groups, whatever, Bobby's act falls flat, but rather than discouraging Bobby from doing comedy at all, Mr. Sack tells Bobby to shift his focus elsewhere.
You're a white man. Get in touch with your white roots. Think of the stuff that's funny from your point of view.
He also tells Bobby not to get discouraged by his dad's naysaying, which is a very reasonable message that gets a little misunderstood by Bobby, who then takes this wise bit of advice in the worst way possible.
Budasak says I shouldn't listen to you. He says good comedians are rebels and they never listen to their dads.
What?
And this brings us to this utterly magnificent scene where Budasak lays into Hank with a series of brutal yo mama jokes, but even better than that, I really love this little detail of the DJ assistant guy going like, "Oh Jesus, why'd you say that?" when Hank hits a little bit below the belt.
It's obvious that your mother did not raise you right.
Uh-oh.
I don't know, I just really love that DJ guy. Anytime where we get a little peek at the wider world, at the relationships or friendships or whatever that are happening off screen that we don't get to see is just great. Those two clearly have a history together, one that is unspoken and kind of fun to imagine. But there's no time for that. Hank's mother is getting righteously clowned on, and Hank is handling it in the most Hank way imaginable.
Your mama's so fat, when she walks around in high heels, she strikes oil.
I don't think you've ever even met my mother.
Now, while some would call this Hank's biggest Karen moment, where he goes complaining to the manager, I wouldn't dream of saying so myself. First of all, because my poor mother's name is actually Karen and she has suffered too much already, but mostly because I think Hank wasn't entirely wrong to complain. Budasak's insults should have remained focused on the subject of cars or traffic, just so he could later claim that these were still part of his lesson plan, which I'm sure he had.
You trying to say that a black man can't put together a lesson plan?
And believe me, it hurts me more than anything to say that Budasak is in the wrong. I was an educator myself, and there were many times where I could have verbally obliterated some little Fortnite hooligan and his Logan Paul chums, but you never stoop to their level, even to dunk on them. Just send their ass to the principal and take comfort in the thought that the parents will be forced to spend more time with their annoying spawn and will likely do the dirty work for you and might even have their children taken away. It's just that easy. But instead of seizing on the opportunity to have Hank removed from the class, Budasak finds himself in a checkmate, getting fired from his teaching job, but at least he went down swinging for the fences.
Ever heard of the First Amendment? Thomas Jefferson's turned over his grave right now, and the slave lady's on top.
Now see here, Thomas Jefferson was a founding father. He designed and built his own house.
And I was about to get all up in this episode's face and say that this is a complete misuse of the First Amendment since it doesn't protect you from being dismissed for harassing people. But then I realized that Snaps is both a comedy club and the driver's ed location, as evidenced by the sign on Budasak's boss's door. So this confuses me a bit because it seems like the boss is this button-down government worker type, but he's also in charge of a comedy club and gets all huffy when Mr. Sack makes jokes. Whoa, what a thought there. I think we'll have to go with the very generous interpretation that this boss dude is more in line with Hank's idea of comedy, someone who also laughs at Tony Danza, but expects a certain decorum from his educators, but not the comedians. The comedians can say whatever they want, the educators kind of have to clean up their act, you know? The boss does offer to get Hank moved into the chocolate lovers class to wrap up his required sessions, which is an even weirder thing to be under this guy's jurisdiction. So he's the driver's ed guy, the comedy club guy, and the chocolate lovers class guy? What the fuck? Even the class that Con gets stuck into makes much more sense because it's a prop comedy class.
I covered in watermelon.
But I'm not interested in those Gallagher impersonators. I've got something I need to set straight, something I have neglected to mention a few episodes back, and that is Peggy's cute little work area. Tucked away with the water heater, I believe Peggy's office first made its appearance in the Mono episode, and it returns here when Bobby goes to ask his mom about their white roots.
Mom, you got a minute?
Well, of course, Bobby. Anything for you, honey. Now, what is it?
We may laugh at Peggy setting a literal timer for this discussion, but I am pretty sure I'd already have completed Season 4 of King of the Hill by now if I did the same thing to my so-called friends and family. But now wait, hold on a second here. I timed this interaction with Peggy, and it only lasts a meager 36 seconds, which is both a solid example of fraud and a miracle that she managed to set up so many delightful jokes in such a short space of time.
Well, honey, it sounds like you've never heard of a butter churn with a mind of its own.
I'm pretty sure that was my nickname in high school. But sadly, not all of us can get by with butter churns and half-assed masturbation jokes, which means that Bobby has to go to the best source of comedic thievery, the internet. And it's amazing to see how little the internet has changed since 1998.
Wow.
Like I told him, man, they would fix that dang old thing to put on some duct tape, man.
What? They took Bobby to Snaps?
Before we join Hank's panic dash to Snaps, I want to briefly address the white supremacists in the room because I know you're listening, and here's what I have to say to you. Cut that out. No. Stop it. Stop it. With racism defeated, we can now head to the club.
Whoa! Now that's what I call general haberdashery.
I'm pretty sure that's my favorite line delivery in the whole show. It's perfect. Perfect. Down to the last minute details. In fact, let me hear it again. My man Toenail, give me that good stuff.
Oh, me! Oh, my! Whoa! Now that's what I call general haberdashery.
It's just so amazing. And hey look, Buddha-Sack might have lost his teaching job, but he is still the master of ceremonies at the club. Excellent. But less excellent is Poppin' Fresh's new act, which is fresh off of Uncle Ruckus's website. No relation.
Yeah, it's tough being a white man these days. It's tough, I tell you. Folks, I'm so white. During the riots, I went out and bought a television.
You know, it's odd to say, but I almost think that Bobby's act here could have worked. I brought up Uncle Ruckus from the Boondocks because he is the perfect example of how racist jokes can become palatable to non-racist people. Uncle Ruckus is an ugly, foul-mouthed loser, someone who is so outside of what we would consider a sane human being that he can pretty much say whatever he likes because we know he's intentionally written to be at the most extreme end of things. It's the same reason why Eric Cartman can get away with being the worst human being imaginable. He is such a piece of shit, and his shitty ideas only make him more miserable and alone than he already is. Like, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. He's awful to everyone, so the world is awful back to him, so why would you follow that example? This is why Bobby's act doesn't work, because he is so obviously a good kid. Someone with a relaxed personality, someone who's likable, someone who has a calm demeanor, so when we hear all this racist stuff coming out of Bobby's mouth, someone who seems calm and put together, it sets off alarm bells in our heads going oh my god, what is this kid doing? Which leads to the crowd booing his act. But at least Dale is there to spring to the rescue.
Uh-oh, Bobby's in trouble.
Or not. And as Hank comes to Bobby's defense, we get just another, Ooh, just a brilliant line delivery. So tell me, viewers, do you think this guy sounds drunk, or does he just have a wildly, yeehaw accent? Let's listen to it.
He doesn't know what he's saying.
Well, who are you, the Grand Wizard?
I'm thinking drunk. Definitely drunk. I mean, he goes who are you, the Grand Wizard? See, I can't do it. That was kind of a crappy impersonation, because I'm not drunk. I need to be drunk to do that. But just as the crowd is gearing up to start throwing hands with Fat White Lump, including Bill, an unexpected voice comes to Bobby's defense.
You ain't allowed to talk that way. Not in America. Am I right, y'all? Yeah, that's right. Wrong.
That's right, folks. Buddha Sack is out here defending dumb-ass racism. And you know what? I agree. That's right, I agree with him. If Bobby wants to say racist stuff, then God bless him. I say he should speak. But let's also remember that the First Amendment goes both ways. As much as Bobby or others are free to express themselves, the venue they're at also has the freedom to say, we don't want your message promoted in our space. And similarly, the patrons of this club can use their freedom of expression to boo, argue back, or even just decide to leave and take their business elsewhere. Although I do have to acknowledge, it is exhausting to combat white supremacy with this pure style of rhetoric and capitalistic maneuvering, but it is important to do nonetheless, perhaps the most important work we can do. And even though I would argue that white supremacy, especially politically active white supremacy, shouldn't be considered free speech, since it is entirely predicated on a systematic cult of violence that would see the removal of entire portions of the population, it is at least nice to have a system where someone can be loud and proud with their racism, just so we can know exactly who to ostracize. And Buddha Sack agrees with this, you see?
We got a thing called freedom of speech. And a man on this stage can say any dumb-ass thing he wants.
God, I love that face he's making right there. He looks like he just thinks he dropped this huge, F you truth bomb on them. But then Buddha Sack goes through the same feeling that I do when I go off on too big of a lecturing tangent and employs the objectively correct strategy to lower the temperature in the room.
Buddha's so small, he go hula hoop with a Cheerio. I said Cheerio, not Fruit Loop, Cheerio.
I am 100% convinced that Buddha Sack himself manifested Hank's diminished gluteal syndrome in this episode. The man roasted Hank so hard it gave him a medical condition. Now that's what I call general haberdashery.
I gotta thank you, Mr. Sack. You kept a cool head in a crisis situation.
And just to show that there's no lingering hard feelings, Hank makes amends for getting Buddha Sack fired by offering him a job at Strickland Propane, which I don't know if he has the authority to do so, but let's just go with it.
If you're looking for a real job, you ought to consider a career in propane. You know, this whole humor fad is pretty much on the way out.
The episode concludes with one more comedic set from Mr. Sack, although this time Hank gets in on the action as well.
And your mother is so ugly, it affects her self-esteem.
Best of all, it ends with a little after-credits scene, one in which Roger Sack makes up for the brutal racial stereotyping of claiming that white people have no butts, and he does it with grace and dignity.
That butt is the bomb.
Yeah, I think it's time for the X-Files. Now! Go!
Man, I really, really miss the days when these shows would do little lead-ins for other shows. How did I let those glory days slip by? Ugh. And that's how Hank Hill got his groove back. Of all the celebrity guest stars that King of the Hill ever had on, I think we can all agree that Chris Rock was indeed one of them. Unlike ZZ Top and Willie Nelson, Mr. Rock was given the dignity to appear as an original character, one with his own motivations, flaws, and desires. And much to his credit, Christopher Igneous Rock really sold his performance with an authenticity that I think is sometimes lost when troublesome celebrities that are so up their own butt give a half-assed performance, or who are just clearly too bullheaded to do multiple takes. They're not doing a performance, they're just reading lines, and it's okay, whatever.
After I told you to lay off, Hank, you set up this whole thing. That does it, Portis. Your show is canceled.
You don't tell me when the show is canceled. The network does.
Buddha Sack's character is perfectly contrasted against Hank, and his mentorship of Bobby is what grounds him as a likable human being, rather than just a walking, talking cameo.
Now, Mr. Hill here has a complaint.
Hey, ain't my fault he don't got a butt. Tell him to take it up with God.
And since Johnny Hardwick is credited with writing this episode, I think we should all give him a big round of applause for writing some very cutting comedy bits with material that fits very well with Mr. Rox's usual style, albeit filtered through the very family-friendly glory hole that is the Fox network. The only critique I would offer towards this episode is that Con, Bill, and Dale are extremely underused. They obviously did what they could to broaden the plot scope and get the guys involved, but it almost feels like there's a scene or two missing. Oh, and fun fact, the video that Hank suggests to the driver's ed boss guy actually does exist.
I'd like to recommend a movie I saw in high school called Red Asphalt. Showed a fellow's brains being scraped off the road. Now that kept me straight.
And unlike the fake-ass film series Faces of Death, Red Asphalt is actual real footage of real-life deadly accidents captured by the greatest human beings to ever live, the California Big Hunks, also known as the California Highway Patrol. Go get 'em, boys! God, imagine having your death immortalized in the lowest form of media imaginable, the educational video. Ugh. And with that, I hope you've enjoyed this educational video on road safety, the First Amendment, and PAWGs. We learned so much today, didn't we, Bobby? Of course not. But now I want all the kiddos in the room to get on their moon shoes and take their gack and get the holy hell out of here. Because Mr. Review to Death has a very adult episode to talk about, one that isn't for children. Although, one that has the horrifying audacity to star children.
A tape which marks veteran porn star Fernanda Valley's return to the adult film industry on the occasion of her 18th birthday.
Oh God, isn't that just about the darkest joke you've ever heard on King of the Hill? My God. But that's a conversation for another day. For now, we can say that this episode, titled Traffic Jam, has indeed been reviewed to death. A super special thank you to you for making it all the way to the end of the video. I know this was kind of a weird one to do and I was so nervous about it, but I hope you got something out of this. Just really though, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next review.
What's up, Boom Boom?
I told you not to call me that.